Good morning, students. Let's discuss today about the next chapter, consent of the parties. This is chapter number 5, the fifth segment of your Indian Contract Act syllabus. What do you mean by consent? Consent definition is given under Indian Contract Act 1872. Parties, when they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. What does it mean? We would rather equate this concept of consent to consensus ad idem. What do you mean by consensus ad idem? When you say consensus ad idem, I propose one thing, the acceptor also accepts the same thing. For example, if I sell my car to B, B should also think A is selling the car. If B is thinking I am selling my bike, if B is thinking I am selling my house, it is not a same thing and same sense, right? If I am actually selling my car, B should also think that A is selling the car. B is thinking differently by saying that A is going to sell his house, A is going to sell his bike, whereas I am selling car. There is no equated mind, there is no equal sense of mind between the parties. That is called the consensus ad idem. So that particular equation or particular concept is now equated to this concept, which is the same thing. When parties to the contract, when I say parties are parties to the contract, agree upon the same thing in the same sense. They should ideally agree upon the same thing, same manner, same sense, same subject matter, etc. If one party offers one thing, the other party accepts thinking that he is going to accept another thing, there is no equal sense, there is no equal thing or equal common sense between parties. Therefore, in that case, there can be no contract at all. There can be no agreement at all. If there is no agreement, there is no contract, obviously. So, consent of the parties is divided into two basic things. Consent among the parties have to be, first is free and second is genuine. What is free? What is genuine? If, for example, if I am going to offer my car to B for 1 lakh, I am offering the car to B. I am selling my own car to B, which means that I am willing to sell my car. Nobody, please remember, nobody is forcing me to sell my car. I am out of my own wish, out of my own like, and my own thing of offering it willingly. Rather, we say willingly. I am offering my car. There is no external pressure, there is no external party who is pushing me to sell my car. At the same time, on the part of B, he is going to accept it willingly. There is no kind of a external pressure on him as well. There is nobody in the world who is pressurizing him to buy my car. He is also going to buy my car willingly. I am also going to sell my car willingly. So, it is a free consent. And the genuine consent means, again, there is absence of collusion, absence of fear, absence of force, absence of violence, absence of physical force, threat, pressure, etc. between parties. So, if there are absent, then the consent given is free and genuine. So, this is the difference between free and genuine consent. So, when we come to slowly the main part of the topic, absence of free consent. When I say section 15 to section 22 of the Indian Contract Act says that if the following elements are present in the contract, then the consent is not said to be free. You are very clear, the consent is not said to be free. What is that? Coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, mistake. Okay? Coercion, section 15 of the Indian Contract Act. Undue influence, section 16. Fraud, 17. Misrepresentation, 18. Mistake, 20 to 22. That is what the definition given in this section is 15 to 22. Right? So, coercion. What do you mean by coercion? So, what is next topic? Coercion. So, we shall slowly discuss about each and every component. First is coercion, section 15. What does it say? Committing of an act or threatening to commit any act forbidden by the APC. Detaining unlawfully or threatening to detain any property to the prejudice of a person with intention to cause any person to enter into an agreement. So, when you look at the definition of the coercion, it is very easy to mug up from the text material or the study material, but you need to understand what is the concept and it becomes very easy to mug up at a later point of time. The entire definition itself has to be divided into separate up into various components and you have to study. Okay? If you are able to break up into components and study, it is easy for you to assimilate the concept into your mind and it is easy to to understand the concept. Okay, committing of an act or threatening to commit any act forbidden by the law. If I am going to take a gun, okay, that is what I have written as an example here. A points out a gun at B, induces by force to enter into an agreement. So which means that I want to sell my house to B, but what happens is A, instead of willingly selling his house, he takes out this gun from the packet, shows at B, and by force asks B to enter into an agreement to buy A's car. But B is not willing to do so, but he has to do, because if he doesn't do, A will make a gun shoot at him, B will die. That is why B, out of fear, enters into an agreement with A for purchase of A's car. Is it a genuine consent and free consent as I defined in the initial part of the discussion? No. It is not a free consent, it is not a genuine consent. B is now induced by force and threat to buy A's car because of the fear that B is suffering, because of A's threat to kill B. B is under fear to get killed, therefore he gives his consent under force or under fear that he will get killed, therefore it is not a free consent and genuine consent. So here force is employed by A on B by showing gun at B, therefore it is a violence, it is a kind of a violence or a physical force. So coercion focuses on the physical force or use of threat or violence. That is meaning. Coercion, actually speaking, it is the meaning. Physical force or violence or threat. Okay. Committing of an act or threatening to commit any act. If I am going to do an act or I am going to threatening to do an act. Hey, I am going to show a gun at you and I am going to kill you. I am going to threaten you. That is also coercion. I am just showing a gun at you. That is committing an act. Either committing or threatening to commit. Detaining unlawfully. This is another important thing. There is a person who is going to enter into a contract with me, but is not entering because of some delusion or confusion or some kind of a fear. Okay. So where A is saying, if you don't enter into a contract with me, I am going to take away your property. I am going to detain your property. I am going to take away your property. Then, if you enter into a contract with me, I will give over your property. Okay, so you are trying to detain his property unlawfully, means much against his wish. You are going to take away his property, or you are threatening to take away his property. To the prejudice of person means against the wish of that person, of the person to whom you are actually forcing. You are forcing a person, that person interest is getting affected because his willingness is getting affected. That is called prejudice. With intention, what is your intention? To cause that person to enter into an agreement. Your intention is not to kill him. Just by showing a gun at him, you are not going to kill him, but you are just forcing him to enter into an agreement. That is your end purpose, that is your final purpose. Therefore, you are forcing him to enter into an agreement. So, therefore, these 5 conditions are to be satisfied. You have to first lawfully assimilate each and every concept slowly in your mind by breaking the definition into parts and then start reading. It is very easy for you to understand the concept. So, committing of the act or threatening to commit an act forbidden by the IPC. You have to remember very, very important topic here. You must do an act which should be punishable, which is not acceptable by the Indian Penal Code. When you say Indian Penal Code, that is called IPC. So when you say forbidden, forbidden means it is against IPC, which is not acceptable by the IPC, which is violative of IPC, or which is punishable by the IPC, anything. For example, theft, murder, rape, etc. All these are the cases of offences which are punishable under IPC. Therefore, any offence which you are doing, you should employ or do an act which is punishable by IPC. Okay? The act should be of such a nature, it should be an act punishable or forbidden or avoided or not acceptable by the IPC. So these 5 definitions, 5 parts of the definition, we have to break up and study, very, very easy and easy to understand. The other part of it is, when you come to the specific indicators like high prices, high interest rate being charged by the traders, it is not coercion. You need to understand. Traders generally have to charge high prices because they have to outbeat the competition. Because if they charge still a lower price, but the competitors charge a higher price, their competitor is going to beat this trader. Therefore, trader will obviously charge high prices. Trader will need to charge high prices. If there is a delay from the customer to accept the deliverable, he will obviously put interest on the customer. Therefore, there is a need for the trader to do so because in the interest of the business he is doing so. It is not a coercion. The main purpose is to ensure that his business is not affected. Therefore, you are not penalizing the customer. Please understand, you are trying to regularize your business. It is not a coercion. So, high prices and high interest rate charged by the trader is not a coercion. Then comes the case law, Amir Raju versus So this was a very popular case of judgment given by the court. What is Amir Raju versus Seshamma case? There was a Seshamma who was a wife of the husband Amir Raju. Okay, so Amir Raju was a person who is doing his business in a particular place. Seshamma was a wife of Amir Raju. So Amir Raju wanted one day Seshamma through use of force and threat that he is going to commit a suicide. So Amir Raju said that I am going to commit a suicide. What is the purpose means? Unless and otherwise Seshamma, his wife, is going to execute a deed or a transfer deed transferring the property of her, Seshamma's property, to Amir Raju's brother. Okay, Amir Raju is using a fear of the words that he is going to do he is going to commit a suicide by killing himself. He will not kill himself if Seshamma is going to transfer the property to Amir Raju's brother. Now what happens is Seshamma didn't want to do so, but because of the fear that Amir Raju, her husband, will commit a suicide, she out of fear executed a transfer deed transferring her property to her Amir Raju's brother. But later she felt that this is not proper, so she filed a case with the police authorities and the case went to the court and court held that it is purely a threat to commit a suicide, it amounts to coercion. The judgment given by the court is whenever you are threatening a particular person that you are going to commit or do a suicide or self-attack or self-death, in that case it is amounting to coercion. It is a coercion. It is a landmark judgment given by the court in the Amir Raju versus Seshamma case. Last is effect. Whenever you see a effect, what is the effect of this coercion part of it? Any person who is injured, any person who is aggrieved, any person who is a victim, he called as a victim or aggrieved party. The aggrieved party can avoid the contract, he can come out of the contract and say that I am going to avoid the contract, I am not ready to execute this contract, I am moving out of the contract. So in this case, the court held that Seshamma, being the wife of Amir Raju, can very well avoid the contract because a threat in the form of committing suicide was imposed on her. Therefore, she can very well come out of the contract and can avoid the contract. This is the judgment given by the court. Therefore, whoever is the aggrieved party or the victim or the sufferer or the injured party, because of the coercion induced on him, they can avoid the contract or can come out of the contract or set aside the contract. The concept called as come out, set aside, avoid, everything is one and the same. Can set aside the contract or avoid the contract. So this is a provision relating to coercion. Okay, the next topic is section 16, undue influence. So undue influence, what is meant by undue influence? When you say that the word itself implies undue means unnecessary, okay, or that which is not genuine. You are trying to influence by taking advantage over the other person. That is called undue. In popular terms, in recent life, everybody knows that you are taking too much advantage of my situation. You are saying, right? Whenever you get into troubles and talks with the people or even parents or even whoever is a close friend of you, you may say that hey, you are trying to push too much. You are pushing me. You are trying to take too much advantage of me. You are taking too much situation, advantage of the control of situation, etc. You are saying, right? The same thing is what we are saying. So undue influence means too much advantage, too much influence. That is called undue influence, which is not acceptable in the normal course of the life. Okay, that is why we call it as undue influence, unnecessary influence or too much of influence or advantage. Sorry. So we have to first define again the same way. You have to bifurcate the definition into three parts and read. It is very easy for you to assimilate the concept into your mind. Therefore, I divided into three basic parts. The entire definition. When you read through the definition as a whole, it will be very confusing because it's running into 2-3 lines as such continuously, but I am dividing into three parts. Relationship between parties subsisting and is of such a nature. There has to be a relationship between parties. Obviously, there has to be two parties. There has to be a two-party kind of a thing, and there has to be some relationship between the parties. What is the nature? It is of such a nature that, so go to the second part. One party is able to dominate the will, underline the will. What is dominate? He is trying to take advantage. He is trying to impose influence. Imposing influence, that is called dominating. You are trying to dominate him. You are trying to have control over the party. Against the will of the person. Against his will, against his wishes, against his interest. You are trying to take some control over him by taking, dominating him and taking against the will of that person some kind of a thing. Okay, and uses, once it takes advantage or below the other person being completely controlled, right? And using that position, he is trying to take unfair advantage over the other. He is trying to influence him and getting the things done. Okay, those kind of things is called undue influence. But law, what they say is that law is clearly very clear. It says there are certain kinds of relationship where automatically there is a presumption or there exists undue influence. Last stage, what are the cases? Parent and child, guru and disciple, doctor and patient. The best example is doctor and patient. Nowadays we have COVID, etc. Right? So wherever we have a small problem like a cold or a fever, right now COVID is there. Even if we have cold or fever, doctors will try to test for a COVID. You get into 40,000, 50,000, 1 lakh rupees test, etc. So doctors are trying to influence you by getting into COVID kind of a thing. Okay, and they try to take unfair advantage by putting yourself into unnecessary mental pressure and getting into thousands of tests, and will be put into examination, and then by the time it is found is reaching 1 lakh or 1 lakh 20, they are getting satisfied, they will release you from the hospital because they got the money. Right? It is a kind of a doctor-patient relationship. Now, I am taking a small example where you are diagnosed for a fever. Many of them would have witnessed this case. You have gone to a hospital, they will take you for X-ray, they will take you for all range of tests for a small fever, which you obviously take a dose, it will get solved. But the problem is, you are taking it to a hospital, doctors is trying to take unfair advantage over your position, unfair advantage over the situation, they are trying to control you, they are taking unfair advantage over you, and they are putting it to thousands of tests. Okay? So in that case, instead of a diagnosis which is proper, instead of a proper or a clear diagnosis, they are putting it to thousands of tests and finally they are relieving you. So it is a kind of a situation where undue influence is exercised upon the patient by the doctor. So doctor-patient is an example, and guru-disciple example, and parent-child example. Contract with a partnership women. So another important provision under undue influence is that whenever a contract is entered into by a person with a partnership women, what is called partnership women? You know, a Muslim woman, she wears a black dress completely from the head to the foot. She wears a black dress. The purpose is she is observing complete seclusion. Seclusion means she observes complete separation from the society. So she is not willing to talk to anybody. She is not supposed to talk as per Muslim sentiments, Muslim customs, right? She is not supposed to talk to anybody, show her face to anybody, etc. So observes complete seclusion or withdrawal from the society, public or the society people. So whenever a contract is entered into by a person with kind of a partnership women or the Muslim women, what happens is, person entering into the contract to ensure, whoever is putting a contract with the Muslim partnership women, he has to ensure that she is able to understand the terms and conditions of the contract. You have to read through the terms and conditions of the contract to her. She is able to understand the terms and conditions of the contract, and she should be able to take independent judgment. She should be able to form independent advice or judgment. You should not influence her to take the decision. She should take the decision on herself. So, independent decision should be done by herself based upon understanding of your terms and conditions that you are explaining to her. She should be able to form an independent advice. She should not be influenced by you. Law states very clearly. So, she has to take an independent judgment or the advice based upon the terms and conditions understood by her. So, it is your duty to make her understand the terms and conditions. That is for the law states. Otherwise, he can avoid the contract. The same principle applies here. For coercion, the effect is, again the same effect applies for undue influence. The party whoever is injured, the party whoever is the victim, the party whoever is aggrieved party can avoid the contract. Can avoid the. You say fraud. Many of them in the recent cases is the third absence of free consent, the third category is fraud. Many of them in the recent life used to say you are a fraud, you are cheating. You know, you have been talking to your colleagues, friends, or anybody who meet them in the public. To get into frustration, you are using the word fraud. So first of all, you have to understand what is the meaning of the fraud that is given under the Indian Contract Act 1872. What is the meaning of the fraud? Suggestion as to fact which is true, but you believe it to be true, and you know it is false, but you are saying it is true. It is rather say this way: you are suggesting a fact, you know it is false, but just to the outside world to have an impression on you, you are saying it is true, but you know it is false. Please understand, you know it is false, but you are saying as true. Just example is, I have a bag full of rice. As the owner of the bag of the rice, I am going to sell this rice to B, but unfortunately I am going to say this bag is full of gold. I know it is full of rice, but I am saying it is full of gold. I am making the sale of that bag to B. B is buying the goods without the knowledge that he is buying the goods, without knowledge of the fact that it is full of rice. He thinks that he is buying gold and he actually buys. I am going to get my price and I am going to run away from the situation. So it's a clear case of fraud because I know the person who is offering the rice bag knows that it is only rice. But he says to the outside person or B that it is full of gold, whereas it is not gold, it is full of rice. Therefore, it is a clear case of a fraud because I know, I pronounce it is a fact as a true, whereas I know it is false. Therefore, it is a clear case of fraud. Okay, are you reading? Then, second is active concealment of fact. What is active concealment of fact? You know there is a fact which is there, but you are trying to hide that fact and you are trying to the outside world saying that you are trying to exclude that fact and you are projecting the remaining to the outside. For example, A is the owner of a horse. Okay, A is the owner of a horse. He is going to sell his horse to B. But the horse is suffering from mental problem. Horse is suffering from mental illness. He is going to just like that sell the horse to B because he wants to get rid of the horse because he is suffering from mental problem. But B is thinking that his horse is very good condition, he buys it. But later, he goes on a ride to a beach on the horse which he has bought. He threw away him on the road and he was hurt. Here the problem is, A knows the horse is suffering from mental illness or the horse is mad. But despite the fact that this horse is mad, he has concealed, right? He has not told the fact that the horse is mad. If you would have told the fact that the horse is mad, B will not buy it. Therefore, with an intention of selling the horse, with the intention of punishing or penalizing or unnecessarily penalizing B, he has hidden the fact and he has sold the horse to B. Hidden the fact of madness, right? Therefore, he has sold the horse. So, it is an active concealment of the fact. Third is promise made without intention to perform. What is promise made without intention to perform? Here again, I go and get a money from the money lender for 1 lakh rupees. Money lender is going to give me 1 lakh rupees. He is saying, sir, I am paying you 1 lakh, you need to give me 10 installments of 10,000. But I am going to pay, I am promising him to say that I will definitely pay, sir, God before promise before the God, etc. And then I am going to come out. But at later point of time, I am not even thinking of the promise, I am not even paying it, I am just like that remaining calm. Now the money lender will put a case on me. Obviously, I don't pay anything. But I made the promise, but I have no intention to perform. I have no intention to commit it. I have no intention to pay money. Right? Therefore, I have just made the promise without any intention to pay or perform. Therefore, it is said to be a fraud. Any act which the law declares to be fraudulent. When the law says that this act is a fraudulent activity, speculation is a fraud. If you are, for example, card games. In many cases, like even in Sun TV or those kind of things, right, where we have many games which are being played, right? So that those games where it is purely a game-related game, if you are lucky, you get a win. If you are not lucky, you are not win. So those kind of things where it is clearly a fraudulent activity. There's another case where, just from the legal point of view, I am saying there are many cases where the brokers used to deal with the girls. It is a kind of a contract of trading with the girls for unnecessary illegal purposes, etc. So that case it is said to be a fraudulent activity. You are not supposed to deal with it. So it is said to be a fraudulent kind of activity. So law declares that activity as a fraudulent activity. And any other act fitted to deceive. Underline fitted, underline to deceive. What is meant by fitted? Fitted means you are designing. You are trying to put a design. You are trying to put a structure. The purpose is to deceive. From the outside world, if you look at a particular transaction, it seems to be a genuine transaction, but in reality, it is a fraudulent transaction. The purpose of the transaction is to put the other party into trouble, put the other party into problems. You are trying to deceive, you are trying to cheat that person because of the transaction. Therefore, it is said to be an act which is fitted to deceive. Fitting means designing, structurizing, or you are trying to put a kind of a wholesome structure. All this are done with an intention to deceive or to cheat as a person. So these are the 5 important points. Suggestion as to fact which is untrue, active concealment of fact, the promise made with the intention to perform, without intention to perform, any act the law declares to be fraudulent, any act fitted to deceive. So these are the 5 important provisions of section 17, fraud. Next important topic is mere silence is not fraud. You need to remember, guys, whenever there is a situation where you are unable to speak, because of the circumstances and situations you are unable to speak. Obviously, it is not a fraud because you are unable to speak. But remember, there are two exceptions to this rule. Mere silence is not amounting to fraud. Silence amounts to fraud. Silence is fraud, provided these two conditions are acts as an exception. Where you are under duty to speak in a particular circumstances, but you are not speaking. In Tamil, it is going the popular saying, "Enga pesaramo pesu." Enga pesama irukkumo, anga pesama. Pesa vendiya edathila pesama irundha problem. That is the way, right? Duty to speak. Wherever there is a duty to speak, wherever you need to speak, you need to speak. Wherever there is no duty to speak, you have to remain calm. But you are acting differently. Wherever there is a duty to speak, you are remaining calm. So, it is a problem. It is a clear case of fraud. Second is, silence itself is amounting to speech. Wherever there is a situation by using your gestures, by using your body language, you are silent itself. But the silence itself is giving your consent. It itself is amounting to speech. Then there is no. So, in this case, silence itself is equal to speech. Duty to speak is there, but not spoken. These are the cases where it amounts to fraud. But in other cases, mere silence itself is not fraud, but in those two cases, it is a fraud. It is a fraud in these two cases. Okay. Second is effect. To put a party in the original position and to avoid the contract. The effect is that if I am not done fraud, what would be my position? I will be in the normal position. I will not be deceived. I will not be cheated. So in that case, I will ask the other person who is cheating me to put me back to the original position. That is paying me compensation, paying me damages, etc. So that I will be compensated, I will be okay to go back to the original position, so that I will just forget all the pains and sufferings, whatever. Second is, I can either do this first part or I can avoid the contract. Better to avoid it. Then comes section 18, misrepresentation. What do you mean by misrepresentation? As I obviously said, the formal difference between fraud and misrepresentation is that you are making a statement, but you believe it to be false, but you are saying knowingly it is false, but you are saying it is true. Why? Your purpose is to deceive, fraud, cheat the other person. Correct? That is when the intention is false, when the intention is deliberately, with the intention to fraud, cheat another person, your intention is wrong, therefore it is a fraud. Your intention is genuine, your intention is true, but it happens to be false on the other side. That is not a problem of you, but your intention is what the judgment is. You have to be true to your consciousness, you have to be true to your mind, you have to be true to the heart and soul, right? When you are making a statement, you believe it to be true, you believe it to be 100% perfect, and based on that you are making a representation to the other party. But subsequently it turns out to be false, it is not your fault. It is a misrepresentation. So therefore, wrongly made statement or representation. You are making a statement or representation, but it is wrong, but you believe it to be true. You believe it to be true without intention to deceive means, obviously 1 and 2 goes hands in hand. You are making a statement or a representation in writing or words, whatever will be the mode, but you are making a statement or representation, but without intention to deceive, without intention to cheat or deceive any person. Okay? Though it is wrong, though it is false, still you are making a representation which you believe it to be true. Honest belief of the facts is true and fair, but it is untrue. It is not your problem, but you believe it to be true. Breach of duty without intent to deceive. We are trying to avoid or trying to come out of a situation by violating a duty you are supposed to perform, but the purpose of the violation is not fraudulent, but the purpose is to safeguard the other party. Yes, your intention is true, but you are trying to safeguard the other person, you are trying to not to perform the duty. It is a misrepresentation. Causing however innocent person to enter into an agreement has to make a mistake or to something which is subject matter of the contract. There is a subject matter of the contract or a thing, but the thing or subject matter you are asking that person to make a mistake, but it is not a genuine one. It is only a without intention to deceive the third party, or just like that making a statement. But the purpose is not to harm or injure any person. Therefore, your intention is again true. In that case, all these 5 circumstances intersect in misrepresentation. In misrepresentation, as we said, compared to fraud, coercion, and influence, misrepresentation also, party who is injured or the aggrieved party or victim can avoid the contract. So we go to mistake. This is section 19 to 22 of the Contract Act. It says mistake. When you say mistake, you are the ordinary parlance in the ordinary word. You say, I made a mistake, I made a wrong. So please pardon or apologies. Is what you used to ask in the daily life, right? When we meet a friends or public or we made a mistake, we used to apologize. The same way, mistake under the Indian Counter Act, we divided into two broader categories. One is mistake as to law. Second is mistake as to fact. This is the broader classification of mistake as per Indian Counter Act. One is as to law, mistake as to law, mistake as to fact. Law says that there is a Latin word which says that ignorantia, 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 juris, juris, excusat, excusat, ignorantia juris na excusat. This is ignorantia juris non excusat. Ignorantia juris non excusat, whereas ignorantia facti excusat. So this is the difference between the two. Law says that wherever you make an offense, you make a mistake, you make a wrong, without knowing the law of the country, you are not excused. For example, as per Indian Motor Vehicles Act, everybody knows now popularly many people in the streets like traffic police are there in the road, where they make a mistake, they charge lots of fines, etc. But again, as Indian citizens, we have to be very, very clear in ensuring that we hold a proper title in the form of registration certificate, smoke testing certificate, driving license, insurance copies. All these four have to be there in order to escape from getting caught in the hands of the police, traffic police, right? So these are the four important documents which are mandatory as per provisions of Motor Vehicles Act as per Indian legislation. So whenever you drive a vehicle, you need to hold these four documents. Registration certificate, RC, we call it as RC book, then insurance copies, then we call driving license, and the fourth is smoke emission testing smoke certificate, where they do emission testing for your bike for smoke. These are four things which you need to obviously hold whenever you drive a bike. Without this, your bike will be caught by the police. So, whenever you make a mistake, you say, no sir, I don't know the law, but I don't hold any license, I just like to drive the bike on my way. But you got hold by a police officer, traffic police. You cannot explain the situation because you will not excuse. As per the law, you need to know the law of the motherland. You need to know the law of the motherland. Motherland means wherever you are living. If you are living in America, you should know American law. If you are living in India, you should know Indian law. Ignorance of law and making a mistake, law will never excuse. Law will never say you don't know your law but you make a mistake. Yes, it is not at all excuse. You will be penalized, you will be put into punishment, you will be put into jail. So, wherever you make a mistake without knowing the law, it is not an excuse. Ignorantia as to fact means, ignorantia facti excusat means yes. There is a fact which you don't know, but you are not violating the law, but you are just saying a fact, but you don't know the fact, but you assert the fact. When you represent a fact or you tell a fact, but you don't know whether it exists or not, it is obviously a mistake. That can be excused. But when you don't know a law, but you make a mistake, the law says that you know to make a mistake, but you don't know the law. Well, how can this be? So obviously, ignorantia facti is always excused. Ignorance of fact is always excused. Facti means fact. It's a Latin term of fact. Okay? Ignorantia facti is excused. Ignorance of fact, again, when you say mistake as to fact is broadly classified into two. Mistake as to fact alone is broadly classified into two. Unilateral, bilateral. Unilateral means single. Where there is only one party to the contract is under mistake. It is said to be unilateral mistake. Other party is working. He is not under mistake, but one of the parties is under mistake. It is called unilateral mistake. Bilateral means where both the parties are under mistake, it is bilateral mistake. Okay? The best example is sale of goods and contract, where parties they generally enter into a contract of sale where both the parties are under mutual mistake. Mutual mistake means both the parties are under mistake. When enter into a contract for sale of bag of rice, both of them believe that it is a bag of wheat, whereas it is not a bag of rice. In fact, it is a bag of rice. So both the parties doesn't know what they are buying and selling. It is a mutual mistake. Correct? When both the parties are not knowing that what they are doing, they should not enter into a contract. But despite the fact they enter into a contract, so it is a mutual mistake as to fact. Both the parties are under mutual mistake. Identity. They don't know whom they are dealing with. For example, one party may be in Calcutta, one party may be in Chennai. So he may be the buyer, he may be the seller, but the seller doesn't know who is the buyer doesn't know who is the seller. That's a mistake. So in this case, it's a bilateral mistake. Both the parties are at a mistake. Subject matter. What they are dealing, I don't know. The same for our case, because I am thinking I am dealing in wheat, whereas the item offered is rice. That's a mistake in the subject matter. Subject matter I have been divided into quality, quantity. What quality I am offering, what quantity I am offering, what price I am offering, who is the owner of the goods, and what is the identity. What is the nature, what is the characteristic feature, measure, etc. So wherever you are making mistake, so these are the different bilateral mistake categories which are there. Where there is a mistake as to possibility, the last category is possibility. Whenever you say as per the essential elements of contract, when you go to the first chapter, I told you, contract has to be performed. Whenever there is a doubt as to performance of the contract cannot be enforced. Which means that performance of the contract is essential feature. When you say performance of the contract, it is divided into two. One is your performance is not at all possible when we call it as impossibility of performance. It is possible, it is possibility of performance. When you say impossibility, rather you say impossibility. We have taken as possibility, sorry, it is impossibility. Mistake has been impossibility. When you say impossibility of performance, it is legal impossibility and a physical impossibility. Physical impossibility, best example is A and B enter into a contract, whereas B's wife is dead. Okay, A goes and enters into a contract with a magician, and he is going to put a life into B's dead wife. Is it possible? No. You cannot bring back the life of a person either by magic, which is not at all possible in the eyes of the law. Therefore, it is physical impossibility. Another example is A enters into a contract with B, stating that within 5 days I can go to the space and come back. Space is somewhere in the galaxy or some universal fact, right? It is in the Saturn, Sun, Moon, etc. You cannot go back and you can come back within 5 days. It is totally not possible, physically impossible. You cannot enter into a contract for a physically impossible event. If it is going to be physically impossible event, law does not recognize that, and therefore the contract is totally void or can be avoided. Second is legal impossibility. Law states it is impossible. You cannot go beyond the law and make it possible. Law states it is totally impossible to enter into a contract. Best example is whenever you enter into an agreement for sale of building, you as a owner you are going to sell the building. Okay, but the buyer B, is it directly possible to pay the price and take away? No. Why? There is an impossibility which is imposed legally. What happens is you have to get the building registered. You have to get the building registered with the registrar office. You have to go and fill the form in a stamp paper. It is legally authorized way of registration has to happen. If registration is not happening, it is totally legally impossible kind of a thing. For a transaction which is totally not legally recognized, it is called legal impossibility. Which is not physically recognized, it is called physical impossibility. This is not legal, not coming in lawful terms, it is coming in law terms. So the difference between physical and legal impossibility. Thank you.